Check, check, mic check, mic check, mic check, mic check, mic.
Hello. Hello.
Mic check. Do you remember the mic checker achievement
I don't think so.
in Guitar Hero World Tour?
No,
I
never played it.
You got it. There was an achievement for if you got 100% on Beat It on vocals on Expert. That was called the Mike Checka achievement, I believe.
Why is it called the Mike Checka achievement?
I don't know.
I like it.
I'm gonna look it up. Is that accurate? I'm looking up. Oh fuck! I only have one hand. Guitar Hero Mike Checka, and let's just see what comes up. How to use Guitar Hero. Then the Mike Checka achievement Guitar Hero World Tour. Oh, score 123,450 points or higher on the song Beat It as a vocalist. That's what it was.
As a vocalist. Oh, that makes more sense then.
What did I say?
I don't know. Maybe I just didn't hear vocalist.
Yeah, you had to do it on vocals.
Gotcha. That would be a really hard song to score well on.
It is really hard. I remember it was really hard specifically because that game, the vocals are easier when the notes are longer, because if you don't start exactly on the right note, you can sort of adjust.
Yeah, you can get there.
Right, because you can see it visually and you can adjust your pitch to get to the right note. But in that song, each note is so short that it's like if you don't get it exactly right the first time,
yeah,
you don't really have a chance to correct.
Right.
So
that's tough.
Then there was a glitch on the Xbox 360 where you would glitch something with the system, and you could just put your microphone up to any speaker, and it would read it as 100% on like any song.
Right.
So that's how people I knew would get the Mike Checka achievement on
really
Guitar
cool.
Hero World Tour on Xbox 360. This is not important. None of this matters.
Do you know about the achievement in the Stanley Parable? At least the famous one?
Don't play it for 5 years.
Yeah, go outside. That's the name of the achievement.
Stanley Parable is a great game.
When did that come out?
When did it come out?
Yeah. I'm wondering how long it took before anyone got that achievement.
Let's see. The Stanley Parable, Wikipedia. Let's see. It came out in 2011.
Okay, so 2016 someone got that achievement.
Right.
That's
right.
hilarious.
And then there's supposed to be another expansion pack called like the Ultra Deluxe.
Really?
That's been talked about for at least 2 years, where they're like adding more endings and more narration and stuff.
Yeah.
But I have no idea the status of that.
That'll be fun.
Yeah.
That's a good game. Check that out.
Great game.
Yeah, I feel like I've made pretty much everyone in my life play that at some point.
Really?
I've showed it to a lot of people.
Yeah, that's really good. It's just so weird.
Yeah. It's fun watching what people decide.
Right, because I think when some people, when they first play it, they just do exactly what the voice tells them to do.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see how quickly do people realize you cannot do what the voice tells you to do.
Right.
Like, for me, it was like the third or fourth decision. I was like, wait a second. What happens?
Yeah, what's going on here?
Which is also the interesting... We're not talking about video games tonight. But I do think... I said this before when we talked about video games, which is like, the people who have experience with video games are the people who are like, let me push the limits of this. Let me see what I can do. What are the rules here?
Yeah.
And the people who I think are less experienced are like, they'll do anything to not mess up. But messing up can sometimes be valuable information.
Absolutely.
But if you're not familiar with playing video games, sometimes you don't realize that is a way to learn about the game.
Yeah, especially in that game.
There's
no right way to play that game.
Right, exactly. In fact, I think playing it right and doing everything he says might be the only wrong way to play it.
Yeah, that's how I played it the first time.
Exactly. All right, so so this is big topic tonight.
This is unusual too.
Oh, we're recording in person.
Yeah. First time
since episode
2
1.
2 years. Yeah.
Since episode 1 was the first time we did.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is going to be. Let's see how this goes.
I know. I like recording separately. You know.
I do too. But But why do you like it better?
I mean, I think you were the one who told me this quote that was like, an interviewer said, "If the listener can't see us, neither should I. I shouldn't see the person I'm interviewing if the listener can't see both of us."
Oh, I think that might have been Terry Gross on NPR. I think
maybe.
Or I think that was like I think it was some NPR host who had the attitude of like, even if the guest is in the same city as me, I will book us in different studio locations.
Right.
Because if the audience can't see the guest, I don't want to see the guest either.
Right.
Because there is visual information being communicated.
Totally. Yeah.
When you can see each other, the audience is not picking up on.
Yeah, if you're going to record in person, you at least got to do it Joe Rogan style or something where people have access to the video.
Right. So we're doing it all wrong.
Yeah, exactly. But special circumstances.
But I always, I also like us recording separate because recording it makes it easier for me to edit recording separate.
Really?
Because recording in person, what happens is when we're both talking into our respective microphones, it bleeds into the other person's mic.
Oh,
and
that's
so
tough.
it makes it harder to cut around different things or push different things. Because sometimes there'll be like a long silence or a pause or something, and in editing I'll be like, okay, we don't need to wait that long to hear someone speak.
Yeah.
But if there's bleed from one mic to the other, it makes it a little more difficult to edit around.
Yeah, I can see that why that would be tough.
Anyway, why are we recording in person?
We are recording in person because there was required homework for this topic, and the homework was a documentary that I needed you to watch before we talked about sports. And since we couldn't find it anywhere on streaming yesterday, I just invited you over today and figured it would be just easier to record in person rather than have you watch it here and then drive back to your place and then immediately get on the phone and record.
Right. I didn't see it on streaming anywhere. And I thought, oh, I think it's only on ESPN Plus. Matt has it. So you said, just come over, we'll watch it, we'll record, it's fine. Mm-hmm. Then I come over here today, and you're like, you'll never guess, it's on Hulu. And
right.
I'm like, well, I have Hulu. I could have just, but whatever, we already committed.
Yeah, exactly. We're here.
So yeah, we're talking about sports. That's going to be the main topic.
Mm-hmm.
But you. I think, was it me who suggested this topic in the first place over a year ago?
Probably. This has been on the doc for forever.
Right. But then you were the one who said, hold on, if we're going to talk about sports, we have to talk about this documentary.
Yeah.
What's the documentary?
It's a 30 for 30 documentary called, the episode is 4 Days in October. It's about the Red Sox versus the Yankees 2004 American League Championship Series, where the Yankees went up 3-0 and the Red Sox came back to win the series 4-3. Something that had never been done in baseball before, and it's in the most historic rivalry in sports. And then they went on to win the World Series, which they hadn't done in 86 years. So, very iconic sports history moment, and I like the documentary a lot.
Right. Well, you're a Sox fan.
Exactly.
And so why don't we start there with talking about the documentary? Because we just watched it an hour ago.
Yep.
So you love this documentary.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. And I just felt like it was necessary viewing for me to be able to talk about sports in this conversation. Just because I feel like I've heard you... We've talked about sports before in the past, and I don't know how your opinion has changed on it. But you tend to have the perspective, at least I think, that like sports are dumb. Why would anyone care about sports? And I just needed you to watch that just to see like if you feel something, because it's to me it's like a powerful sports story watching people that have gone without any success for their team for decades on end, and they win in the most dramatic way possible that you couldn't write it any better. That I was like, if you feel nothing watching that, if you don't think it's cool or interesting, or you don't feel some sort of connection to it, I'm like, I don't know where this conversation goes from here. There's something powerful about it, watching a city rally around a team like this.
I'll agree. There is something powerful about it.
Yeah.
And I did feel something.
Okay, that's good.
That being said, I didn't love this documentary.
That's fine.
Because I feel like it was mostly just like replays and recaps and like narration, voiceover narration from like the announcers.
Yeah.
I feel like I wanted more. Like there were parts of the documentary that were just two guys sitting in a bar talking about it.
Right.
And I feel like I wanted more of that. I wanted more of the guy, of just two people who are like fans talking about, like, sort of telling the story of it,
Right.
and what it means to them. And it seemed like it was. I mean, and in fact, I was a little bit confused at the beginning because it said 4 days in October, and it's like day one, and that went by really quickly. But the part that was confusing is that they were counting the days by like midnight, and there were multiple times where the game went past midnight, so they'd be in the middle of talking about one of the games. Like, you know, in the middle of talking about game 5 or something, and then it says suddenly something comes up like day 3 or whatever, and I'm like, what? The game's not over. Oh, right, the clock hit midnight.
Exactly.
And I got a little bit confused at times. I'm like, wait, why are they going to? But and I don't know. I feel like I kind of felt like if they had done a little bit more of like maybe the kind of the storytelling of how people felt about it, maybe it would have been a little bit more impactful. But it did have some impact where I was like, yeah, I do love seeing the people are excited for their team, and that is fun. Like, I do kind of get it. I do feel something. I almost just wish, like, I feel like they could have done more to make you feel even more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know, but maybe that's just me. And also, last thing I'll say, the criticism is I felt a little bit, especially in the beginning, I felt a little bit like it was like assuming you already know the story. And I was like, well, I don't know that much about this story.
All the different players and everything.
Right. And I don't even know, like, exactly the details of, like, how the teams got to this position. And they sort of offhandedly mention the curse, but don't really explain it.
Right.
And it's like, man, if I didn't have a father from New England, if I didn't have a father from Boston, I wouldn't even know what is this curse they're talking about. I don't even know, like, you know, it sort of assumes a kind of baseline knowledge of what happened.
Yeah, it does.
It's almost like not designed for outsiders. It's almost like it's designed for people who lived it and love it.
Yeah,
and
it's for Red Sox fans.
Right, and they just want to relive it again in an hour.
Yeah, right.
But that being said, I don't think it was bad.
Yeah.
I almost wish I would love to see, because the story is so great of the Red Sox having this, supposedly this curse on them where they can't win a World Series for, like, what was it, 86 years?
Yeah.
And then they finally get to win. It's such a great story that I would love a version of this that I could take someone who doesn't really know that much about sports to follow it and sit down and be like, okay, watch this and you'll get it.
Right. But
this kind of wasn't that. Like you said, it's kind of people who already kind of know about it.
Yeah, exactly.
So in that sense, I was a little disappointed. I'm sorry to tell you.
No,
I know you
fine.
love it.
That sort of thing might exist, honestly. I'm sure there's another documentary about this because it's so iconic. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a conversation to be had when, like, finally critiquing documentaries, putting your critic hat on and saying, like, well, is this a good documentary or is it just good source material? Do you enjoy it just because the source material is good, or is the documentary and the commentary actually interesting? And I think that's a fine way to talk about them. It's also something I don't think I really care about, honestly.
With this one in particular?
Honestly, with most documentaries that I watch.
Oh, interesting.
I just if the material is interesting, I tend to enjoy the entire documentary based off of that. Of course, value can be added by interesting analysis and all other sorts of things that make documentaries good. But for the most part, I'm just interested in source material.
Right. Well, that's a good point because, right, like Tiger King is an example where, like, I have no idea how that is as a documentary.
Yeah.
But the material in that is so insane.
Exactly.
That, of course, it's a great documentary.
Yeah. How could it not be?
Right. I wouldn't even begin to think about how to critique that. Oh, well, did this particular interview talking head contribute to the narrative
critiquing Tiger King?
I wouldn't even. Yeah. No, forget that. It's just insane people doing insane things. That's what, you know. I'm not really looking forward to the second one. We'll see how that goes.
I don't know if I'm going to watch that.
Me neither. But okay, so but as far as the story of the documentary with the Red Sox coming back to win the World Series, like, which part of this did you want to go into?
I mostly just wanted to
have it as background.
Yeah, have it as a background just to see it. Like, 'cause if the documentary had no effect on you, I'd be like, okay, there's no middle ground for us to discuss here. You know, I would like think, okay, maybe he's borderline sociopath or something. Because I don't know, I just think it's so impossible to not feel something. And just the whole idea of like it's Spike Lee is in the documentary, and he mentions like movies are fake. This is why sports are so great, is because it's not scripted. It's all real. And to me, it just, the events that happen and the way that they happen, it's just so dramatic and powerful that it's true that you couldn't write it any better. And it's not like the Red Sox just went down 3-0 and then they won the next 4 games. It's each game is really dramatic and has a powerful storyline within the individual game that culminates into the epic finale. So I just needed that as sort of like a baseline to just to gauge how you responded to that.
Okay, so you just wanted me to see it to sort of gauge what is my feeling towards sports.
Exactly.
To see exactly how much are we going to disagree here.
Yeah. Because it's the sort of thing where if you can find no value in it, then I just didn't know where we would go from there, where the middle ground would be for conversation. But I didn't think that was going to happen. But
okay,
I wanted to see.
We do have some middle ground here. To discuss. The thing I'll mention too, speaking of like, the kind of thing where you could show this to someone who doesn't know anything about this and have them understand. The thing I always think of is wrestling isn't wrestling.
Yeah.
Which has been a little tainted now that we know more about the guy behind it.
I don't know about this.
So Max Landis is the guy who put this video together, and he's the son of John Landis, who did like Animal House, Blues Brothers, American Werewolf in London. He directed the video for Thriller. So John Landis is a big time director, and his son Max Landis is also a filmmaker who's done a few things. However, I think he's had some like let's see, on his Wikipedia page there's a whole section for controversy, including misogyny accusations and sexual assault accusations. So he's probably not a good person, this Max Landis.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it.
But like, if you can set that aside,
yeah.
which I could understand if you can't.
Uh-huh.
But in 2015, Max Landis did this short film / documentary / video essay called Wrestling Isn't Wrestling. And basically he outlines and explains in a way that is very, very fun what he loves about professional wrestling. And he head on addresses the criticism of like, it's fake, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he basically, it's like 30 minutes, 25, 30 minutes.
Yeah, it's very good. I've seen it.
And he just walks through like, no, this is why we love it. And he's like, I'm going to tell you the story of professional wrestling. And it's mostly through the lens of like Triple H, which is, he says, his favorite wrestler. And he basically ends it by saying like, look, this is the reason we like this stuff is because it's storytelling. This is Goodfellas. This is it's similar to what you were saying. I'm sorry, what was the guy's name in the Red Sox documentary we just watched?
Which guy?
That said, sports is better.
Spike Lee.
Spike Lee is saying this kind of the same thing. It's like this is storytelling, and Spike Lee's point is that this is real life. This is not a movie. And Max Landis' point is that wrestling is fake, but who cares? It's all storytelling.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's sort of two sides of the same coin in a weird way. But yeah, I think about that too. And when I think about that, I'm like, I do get the appeal of sports and things. I almost feel like maybe the place to start is I'm curious of like your relationship with sports growing up. Did you play sports? I know you did a little bit. And what was sports like in your house, in your family? Because it seems like it was very big.
Yeah. So as far as playing sports, no one cared too much about that. From a family perspective, it wasn't like dad is disappointed in son who isn't good at sports, like that you see in high school football movies, things like that. But we were encouraged to play sports, and I played soccer for a few years in elementary school. I'm pretty sure all of my siblings played some sort of sports, but we never really did it in high school competitively. Well, I guess my brother did, but yeah, that it was just a sort of a casual thing. If you like the sport, we'll keep you enrolled in lessons and everything. But if not, don't worry about it. There was no pressure to play sports. As far as watching sports, that was big between my dad and my brother. Growing up from, I don't know, until I was about 9 years old, I didn't really care about sports, but they were always on. And I remember people would like jump up and down or yell at the TV sometimes when things don't go their way. But for the most part, it was pretty casual. And I got into it when I was 9 years old, watching the 2007 World Series that the Red Sox went on to win. I just remember watching my dad and brother watching those games and realize that I was sort of missing out on it, and they're celebrating, they're having fun. I'm like, oh, this is sort of interesting. And that's when I got into baseball, and baseball's been my favorite sport ever since then. It's just always held my attention. And I got really into it in middle school. Like, I was glued to the TV whenever it was on. I would just sit at home and watch the game cast when it wasn't on TV even, which is just like the visual online of, okay, strike one just came in, ball one just came in, oh, the ball is in play now, what happened? Like, I would just sit at the computer and watch that for hours because I was so into it at the time. And then eventually I got into football. That was later in high school. My brother and dad were just as big football fans as they were baseball fans, but for some reason I didn't get into football until a few years later. And then I became a big Patriots fan as well. And then hockey and basketball, I was casually into. I guess I would watch it if it was on. And I still have a team and support them, and I'll watch it occasionally, but those aren't my sports that I'm into. It's definitely football and baseball. And that's sort of how I got into it. It's just having the family connection that got me into it. And it's just sort of a nostalgic thing to always go back to. It's me and my dad and brother, we always talk about sports, and that's one of our strongest connections, something really fun to talk about, something fun to do together. So I always just go back to that.
Did your dad or your brother play sports?
Yeah, my dad played soccer in college, and then my brother played volleyball. But yeah, it was just like high school and amateur levels, nothing too serious.
Right. Okay. So are they just in general big sports guys?
Yeah. Yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
Okay. And then why are you a Red Sox and a Patriots fan?
Because that was the team that my dad was always rooting for when it was on.
Is he from New England?
Yeah, my dad's from outside of Boston.
Okay. Yeah, see, that's a similarity between us, which is that my dad's from Boston.
Right.
I don't think he was born there, but he was pretty much lived and raised there most of his life.
Yeah.
I forget if you've met my dad. I don't think you have.
I don't think so.
But he has still a Boston accent.
Right.
And it's funny because I've had friends meet my dad before, and they're like, "Oh wow, I didn't realize he was." And I was like, "What accent? I don't even like. Now,
Yeah, you don't even
being
hear
his
it.
son, I don't even hear it anymore."
Yeah, exactly.
You know. But
Yeah, no, my dad doesn't have any sort of accent like that. He was too far outside of Boston to have it. But
interesting. You know what? And what's funny is one time my dad took my sister and I to Boston to see, like, this is where I grew up, and also like it's just a cool city. It's famous and historic and everything.
Right.
And what's interesting is I feel like his Boston accent came back and got thicker.
Really?
When he was, at the very
funny.
least, I noticed it more. But it seemed like it got thicker while we were there.
Just being around everybody.
I guess, being around everybody while we were there just made
That's
it come
awesome.
back more noticeable.
Yeah.
But so my dad also from Boston, and my dad is just a huge sports fan. I had a similar thing with you where it's like my parents never pushed me into it, but I think I said this before, where it's like, well, his father's a jock, so Tyler probably will be one too.
Yeah.
And so I had signed up for a couple of sports as a kid, and I was just never into it. But also, same thing. There was no like disappointed father who, my son doesn't like. Didn't have that, so very lucky there. But it was never something that it naturally just wasn't interesting to me. Like there are some things that are really just a matter of interest.
Yeah.
And sports was just not one of them for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I just never played or got into it. But my dad was always such a sports fanatic. I mean, my dad has played every sport under the sun at some point.
I didn't realize he played.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, my dad, I think I want to say my dad has had 20 different surgeries in his life.
Holy shit.
Mostly sports injuries.
Wow.
He's had I mean, he's broken both of his ankles multiple times, both of his knees multiple times, both of his shoulders multiple times.
That's terrible.
Mostly playing sports. I'll never forget being like 10 years old, and my dad took me to like an indoor skate park, and I was like, well, maybe you should try skateboarding. You like those Tony Hawk games? Let's try it. You know, and I was like a kid on a skateboard, scared to go down like the smallest ramp.
Yeah.
And my dad was like, I don't know, 40 at the time, and he's like, I'm gonna go down a half pipe. We were there, I swear to God, 20 minutes, and he falls down the half pipe, and he's like, we have to go to the hospital. I just broke my shoulder.
Holy shit.
So like my dad was just the kind of guy. He loves sports and loves all of them.
Yeah.
And my dad has told stories about how like he'd be sitting there watching a game on TV, and like, you know, whether it was my mom back when they were married, or, you know, would be like, wait, who are you rooting for in the game? You're cheering for both sides whenever anyone gets a touchdown or whatever. I don't understand who you're rooting for.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh no, I just want to see a good game. I'm just happy to see good like athleticism.
Right. Got to support the team.
But that was also like as I got older and I started to like ask my dad about his interest in sports, that is when I sort of took on a new appreciation for it. Because I never followed it, never played it in any way that mattered to me, really. But as I started to ask him about it, I realized like, oh, there's an interesting element here where people who have played sports understand how difficult it is. Mm-hmm. And that's part of why they enjoy watching it.
Yeah.
And there's sort of I feel like I sometimes end up in the middle of like two arguments where like the people who are like, all sports is stupid, no one should watch it, it's totally pointless, complete waste of time for everybody. I start to argue, I'm like, well, no, because it's interesting. Some people find it interesting.
Yeah.
You know, I don't really find it super interesting, or in some ways I do. We can get to that, but like, I sit there and I'm like, look, people are allowed to have different interests. This is just what interests people. Let it go, and it can be fun to rally around a team or whatever.
Yeah.
And then sometimes like, and then there's the on the other side, there's like the super fans of whatever team it is, and they're like, I only watch my team. I only watch the Patriots, or I only watch the Red Sox, or I only watch, you know, whatever. This is my team. This is what I watch.
Yeah.
And I always look at those people and I go, well, then you're not a real sports fan. I mean, I hate to be I'm not even a sports fan, and I am gatekeeping what it means to be a sports fan.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm gatekeeping sports fandom, but I look at that and I'm like, well, if you're only watching for a team, do you really like sports? Mm-hmm. Or do you just have some emotional attachment? To me, there's a distinction there. Do you see it that way? Do you agree with me?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, I'm not going to avoid games that my team isn't playing in, and sometimes I'll just watch whatever Sunday night football game is on regardless of who's playing because it's entertaining. But there is a part of me that, like, I think it's sort of stupid to say, but like I sort of call myself like I'm more of a Boston fan than a sports fan. Like I care more about watching my team in particular than just what's going on in general. Like as soon as my team is eliminated from the playoffs, I might watch the rest of the playoffs just to see what happens, but I'm not like, oh, well, I got to see how this season ends, got to see who wins the Super Bowl. Like there have been times when the Super Bowl was on and my team wasn't in it, and I was like, all right, I guess I'm just going to watch a movie tonight. Like, I mean, sometimes I'll watch the Super Bowl because I am interested in sports in general and the storylines and everything, but if my team's not playing, I'm not upset if I am not in the loop and following it all.
Yeah, see, that in a weird way almost makes less sense to me. Because, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I guess if it's teams you don't care about, but like if you weren't a Red Sox fan, mm-hmm. and you weren't a Yankees fan, and you were totally indifferent to those two teams, and it's 2004, right? Wouldn't you want? I don't know. I feel like just as a sports fan, wouldn't you look at that and go, "Boy, these Red Sox haven't won a game in 86 years. I don't care about the Red Sox. I don't care about the Yankees. I'm not interested in this rivalry.
Yeah,
but I kind of want to see where this goes. Like as a sports fan, wouldn't you want to kind of see where that storyline goes?
No, and it's more of a case by case basis for me.
Right.
It's just more so like if it's a storyline and it's something that seems interesting, I'm not going to avoid it, and maybe I will put it on, but I'm not kicking myself for missing that if I'm not invested in the teams. But like for example, basically the exact same thing. The Cubs hadn't won the World Series in 108 years. I watched all those games when they were in the World Series and won it in 2016.
Right, that's kind of a similar thing.
Yeah, it's really similar. I mean, I was 7 years old when that happened to the Red Sox, but like I sort of related to the feeling a little bit of what they were going through, and it was a really cool storyline to follow. So yeah, it's not that my team's not playing. I have zero interest in it. It's just like, well, what are the stakes? Why should I watch this? Is this an interesting game? Are there fun players to watch in this one? That's sort of how I decide when it's not my team.
Let me ask you this. Will you still care? Once your team's eliminated, will you still, like, follow the, like, who's winning, like, what teams are going up against who's winning this matchup? Like, will you still follow it, or do you completely check out?
No, I don't think I completely check out. And this is something that has changed maybe working from home, because I have plenty of opportunities to just put ESPN on in the background while I do work. So I'm interested in that just because I sort of like to hear the broad strokes of what's happening in the sport going on. And also, it's just the sort of thing like there are like other players on other teams that I like and other players that I really don't like. So, for example, I don't really like Patrick Mahomes, the football player. Like, nothing wrong with him as a person. I just like it's a little bit fun to hate him as a player for me, just because he gets compared to Tom Brady sometimes, and I think it's ridiculous. So he's not doing well right now, and everyone in sports media is trashing him and like talking about how bad he's playing, and that's like fun for me to listen to in a really weird way. Like, nothing against the person. I just think it's funny to listen to everyone just talk about how bad he's being. It's fun.
Yeah. Okay. So this is sort of getting into why I've never really considered myself like a fan of a team, because I think in some ways I am interested in sports, which may be surprising to anyone who knows me to hear me say that.
Yeah.
I think in some ways I am. What I'm not interested in is like this team allegiance, because it just never, I guess because I didn't start following sports until I was already sort of annoyed by it. But like, I mean, not that I follow it, even still, but like I didn't really start thinking about it or seeing any value in it until after I've been annoyed by sports fans being annoying. Because that's the other thing is like there's sports and there's sports culture, and I find a lot of sports culture to be kind of unbearable. Is that fair?
Sure. Go on.
But like, I feel like there are things about sports that are interesting, but I never like felt like, oh, that this is my team. I mean, I like the Red Sox and I like the Patriots insofar as, hey, these are my dad's teams.
Yeah.
It makes my dad happy when they win, so I like to see them win.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, you're a friend of mine, Matt. It makes you happy when they win. I'd like to see them win because, you know, people in my life that I care about like this, and it makes them happy, and hey, good for them.
Yeah.
But I don't really have an emotional investment in it personally.
Yeah.
That being said, I do sometimes find it interesting of like, well, what are the rules of this? How does this work? What are the mechanics? What are the stakes for this? Like, what's going, like sometimes I'll end up in a conversation where it's like, well, this player, something happened to him, and he's got an injury, so now they have to substitute this person, which means that these stakes are, or like, it's like when we were watching the documentary and they were talking about what's his name who had the bad ankle?
Curt Schilling
had the bad ankle on the Red Sox in 2004. And they're talking about like, what is the strategy when you have a pitcher? If you're the batting team and the pitcher has a bad ankle, how do you change your strategy to adapt to that?
Why don't you just bunt every time?
Make him work, make him run, wear him out, get him off the pitcher's mound.
Right.
Like that, and like the strategic elements of sports and trying to come up with plays and winning in different scenarios. That I find interesting because that is very like methodical.
Yeah.
You know, it's the part I don't think I can ever really get behind is like the real love of a team, and I think it's kind of just because it's like, well, the players change. The people aren't even from the city. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's the Seinfeld bit. At a certain point, you're rooting for clothing.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, am I being too harsh? But do you see where I'm coming from?
No, I don't think that's harsh, really. I just think it's. I've always seen it as more than rooting for clothes. I mean, there's players that you like and you don't like just based off the way they play. Players that are super enthusiastic and engaging. They are fun to watch. So it's specific athletes are like that, and it's disappointing when they move on to another team. But it's not like as soon as they move on to another team, I suddenly hate the person and wish them no success at all. So yeah, I know what you mean about that. There was another point I think I wanted to make. What else were you saying?
I briefly mentioned sports culture and how I find it annoying. Was that it?
Oh, okay. So yeah, I'm not really the sort of sports fan who is so dramatic in terms of like I'm going to be like furious and depressed if my team doesn't do well, and I wish no success upon other teams and fan bases. Like, it's something that I've experienced how much fun it is to win a championship, and as a Boston fan, we've pretty much won more than anyone else in the 21st century. So I've experienced it a lot, and it's the sort of thing that I hope everyone who's a sports fan of a team gets to experience at some point in their life. Like, and this might be controversial saying as a Red Sox fan, but like, would I hate if the Yankees won another World Series? Do I want them to win 0 World Series for the rest of my life? Not really. Like, I'd be happy to see their fan base celebrate a World Series maybe one time as a Red Sox fan. Like, I don't want to see it a lot, but like, I'm not upset to see other people succeeding in sports if it's not my team. I'm not gonna get upset or be angry about those sorts of things, which I think other people in sports and getting into sports culture, other people might not feel that way, and that's the annoying part.
Right, and I think I've been at least somewhat mildly exposed to like the radical sports culture that bothers me. And my dad, I've said, is the kind of person who's like, I'm just rooting for a good game, and so he's not been that bad.
Yeah.
Although I do remember one time where like I think I was like a teenager and I went over to his house and I put the TV on. He's like, wow, this is the first time I'm watching TV in 2 weeks since the Patriots lost the Super Bowl. And I was like, geez,
so
Dad,
funny.
good Lord. Like, you're that depressed about it? He's like, oh, it's just so upsetting.
Right.
Or like my dad has a superstition that if he has to watch the Patriots in the Super Bowl at home alone on his couch.
Good for him.
And if he doesn't, they'll lose.
Yeah.
And there was one time, the last time the Patriots won a Super Bowl, my dad was like, you know what? This is a superstition. This is stupid. I shouldn't be believing in this. This is dumb.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go to the bar with my friends and see the game there.
Yeah.
So he goes, but if they're losing at halftime, I'm going home.
Yeah.
So he goes to the bar. Halftime comes. Pats are down.
Was this the Falcons game?
It might have been.
That would be really funny.
The Pats are down, and all of his friends look at him at halftime, and they go, bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye, Ty. You're leaving.
Uh-huh. That's fantastic.
And he went home and he watched the rest of the game alone by himself in his apartment, and they came back and won.
That's so funny.
And
good
it's
for him.
And that is, and like, look, that stuff is maybe a little too much, but I don't think it's hurting anybody. Although I have seen some really crazy stuff. I remember there was this like friend of a friend, like family friend type of thing a while back. And they were really big into college football,
mm-hmm.
which I'm not even sure I understand that, because it's not like they're the best. The NFL's the best.
Right.
I don't know. But they were really into college football, and they were big Florida Gators fans.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget, there was one time, I believe they were playing the Georgia Bulldogs. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
And there was some call that was made, and the ref, and it was a controversial call by the referee. And the ref made the call, and basically the Gators did not get the point or the touchdown or whatever it was, and then they lost the game.
Mm-hmm.
I think is what.
Yeah.
It was something like that. They went on to lose the whatever.
Right.
And the whole family, the rest of the night, is talking about like, well, it turns out that ref had a brother who went to Georgia, and so he's obviously biased, and this is bullshit, and we got robbed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, can it have just been a call that doesn't go your way?
Right.
That's not allowed. That's not acceptable.
Yeah, it can't be that simple.
Right? No, it can't be that simple. There's got to be a conspiracy. He's got a friend. He's invested. Like it, and that's the kind of stuff where I'm like, dude, you're too far in deep. You've gone too far down the rabbit hole now.
Yeah.
And then like the sometimes like some team wins a big game and they destroy their own city.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that.
Or they lose and they just like either way it's silly. It's even more silly if they win. But then
it's happened in L.A., Vancouver, Philly, tons of different cities.
Right, and that's where that's where the like radical fandom of sports it is really kind of off-putting to me.
Yeah.
Because ultimately the only reason you're a fan of a particular team is because you're born there,
right? Or
because your parents are from there and they get you into it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah,
it's effectively random.
Yeah,
right. I mean, like if you think about it, you've developed an emotional attachment to a random group.
Yeah,
and and it's like if it's your sports team is basically a matter of just random geography that you've been assigned.
Yeah.
Right, proximity. Or or you just happen to be born to certain people who are from a random place on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never been able to overcome that because I don't know. It never. I don't know. I sometimes think that that's a good thing and a bad thing because it's like it's a bad thing because it's making people do absolutely outrageous thing. I mean, just completely outrageous behavior over something that is completely stupid and has no basis in any kind of anything real.
Yeah, yeah.
On the other hand, there is that saying that sports, its function in society, sports is a socially acceptable outlet for xenophobia.
Yeah, yeah.
Where this is just a thing that people have. Humans are a little bit xenophobic. We kind of thrive on this is my team, that's your team. That team is different. I don't like things that are different from me.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to fight about it.
Yeah.
We can't actually kill each other anymore.
Right.
Because we're living in a society, right? We're trying to live in a civilized world. So we can't just kill each other because we look different or act different. But in sports, it kind of becomes so. In a way, it's almost like it's a good thing. It's like, well, and in some cases, I think the people who are sort of, who have actually spent some time thinking about, or maybe the people who I regard as true sports fans, which is kind of a silly thing for me to say anyway.
Yeah.
But I think on some level, every sports fan must, on some level, I hope, know that this is all silly and it's not based on anything real and it's just a consequence of where you happen to be born. And because of that, in some ways, sometimes people are more civil.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's very rare, I think, that where a person would literally not be friends with someone because they support a different team.
Yeah.
I mean, my dad has told stories about getting in groups of Yankees fans and having a great conversation about baseball, even though he's the one Red Sox guy, everyone else is Yankees fans.
Yeah.
And it's like because they're all just generally sports fans and they can just talk about it, and I'm assuming that they all know deep down it's all kind of silly anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it might be one of those things that's like maybe this is just a net good for the world. It gives people a way to kind of channel their tribalism.
Yeah.
But ultimately, most of them at least know it's kind of silly, and so no one's really going to kill each other over this. Whereas there are you look at human history and people have killed each other over, the color of someone's skin or what, like real things that people can't change about themselves and people get killed for, and that this has gone to a very dark place, this conversation. But do you see what I'm getting at? Do you see my criticisms of sports culture, and do you see why I feel like I've never been able to rally behind a team? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so. And just to address the people doing crazy things, one of my favorite stories of this was when Philadelphia won the Super Bowl, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago now, and there's this one guy. This is a Bill Burr story, and this is like how he worded it. Basically, this one guy. There's a video of him doing this, I guess, where he said like if the Eagles, he's an Eagles fan. He said if the Eagles win the Super Bowl, I'm gonna eat horse shit.
I remember this.
And it's not like a bet between friends. Like, oh, if your team loses, you have to do something embarrassing and funny. Like you have to eat horseshit if your team loses. He said, if my team wins, I will eat horseshit. And Bill Burr is like, that guy wanted to do that. Like that guy really wanted to eat horseshit for some reason. So yeah, there is something about sports that leads to people making crazy decisions like that. People rioting and flipping cars over in the streets in Los Angeles when their team wins or loses. Yeah, there's some stuff that's really, really unacceptable. And I mean, this rarely happens, but I mean, there are instances, I think, of like people mugging other fans, you know, and people throwing shit at other fans in stadiums if they're the fan of the away team, and things that are just horrible for sports culture. But those are the definite minority of fans. I think everyone does know that it's really silly. And the way I've sort of looked at it is like the socially acceptable outlet for tribalism, basically. I don't know if this is true or something that I just say about myself, where it's like I let my all my tribal thoughts and emotions, I take that out in sports, because I don't really get upset about sports, but like sometimes it's fun to argue and get a little upset about it. If you're at a bar or something like that, like I'm not really upset at the end of the day, but it's fun to scream and yell about it every now and then. So it's like if I do that in that setting on that topic, can I then handle other tribal things like more appropriately and civilly? Like, can I approach politics from a more level-headed perspective because
you've gotten it out?
Because I get it out through sports. Like, and it's like, is that actually how I operate? Maybe, but like, it's something I at least like to think has made me be a little bit more level-headed about other things.
Right. No, I like that. And that's again going back to like, well, even if you don't like sports, it might be a net good thing for the world. But you know, the thing we've been sort of talking about a lot is team sports in particular. Although, let me just say one more thing. You know, while we've been talking a lot about sports media, and the one thing I did want to mention here is Ted Lasso, which you've seen,
mm-hmm.
I've seen, big fans.
Yep.
But I remember at one point when I was rewatching season 1 before season 2 came out. And season 1 ends with the big match with the team we're following in the show, AFC Richmond. They're going. I forget what team they're going up against.
I think it's Manchester City.
I think it's Man City. And I remember watching it and being like, I'm invested. Like I want them to win.
Right.
Like I'm amped up. I want to see and it's like, oh, this is weird. I'm rooting for a fictional football club, right?
Yeah.
A fictional soccer team.
It's less silly than actual sport.
Right. And in a way, yeah. And I was thinking about like, well, why is that? Why can I get excited about this? And I think it kind of comes down to is like, I mean, one, it's a scripted TV show. They can sort of script it to be as dramatically interesting as possible.
Yeah.
But two, I think there is something to this idea that like, at least for me, I find like individual sports sometimes more interesting than team sports, at least in terms of like who am I going to root for? Because I feel like with the team sports thing, it's like, well, the team you pick to root for is kind of arbitrary in a way.
Yeah.
But with an individual sport like golf, some people will say that's boring. But at least with golf, there's no teams.
Yeah.
You can just follow a guy. Like you could just follow Tiger Woods or Phil Mickelson, or just follow like one player throughout their career,
right,
and watch them compete in different tournaments and things. And that to me makes more sense than being a fan of a team, because the team is arbitrary, whereas at least you can look at certain players and go, well, this guy's onto something, or this person I find really interesting, or this person could be an up-and-comer. I want to see where this person goes. I find it more... It makes more sense to me if you look at it as like, well, these are the people I'm rooting for. as opposed to I'm rooting for this team and the players change all the time and the manager changes all the time.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's. I mean, the question I would ask is like, how do you decide who to root for? And I guess it just depends on who interests you. You know, like watching a random tennis match or something. Like, oh, I really like the way this person serves the ball. Like, that's really cool. It's a little bit different. Maybe that's how you decide. But I also do know fans of team sports that sort of approach their sports fandom that way. Like, I have a friend who wasn't really raised watching sports. His family doesn't really have, these are our teams that we root for. He just somehow got interested in football. And the way he roots for teams is he sort of just watches the games when they're on because he's a sports fan. He'll just put on whatever's on. And whichever player in the game that he finds interesting or is doing something really unique and special, he's like, okay, I'm gonna follow this team. But it's because I like this one wide receiver on this team. And he'll follow that team, and then if the wide receiver goes to another team, he doesn't care about the old team anymore. He's like, oh, I'm just going to follow him and watch him on the new team because that's where he's the reason I'm watching this team. So I want to see him do well and watch that. So it's something that can be applied to team sports, but I think you see it a lot less often where someone just watches all the games for an entire sport, but only roots for individuals and players that they like on certain teams rather than, well, this is my team and I watch them and I root for them.
Yeah, and again, in a way that almost makes more sense to me of like, well, look, this is my guy. I'll go wherever he goes.
Yeah.
I'm following whatever team this guy goes to.
Right.
Because I think he's interesting. He's got a different take on how he throws the ball, or he's got a different strategy, or whatever it is, you know. Yeah, no, in some ways that makes more sense, which I think is why, like, I found myself, like, rooting for a fictional team at the end of Ted Lasso. It's because it's like, well, the show has introduced me to all these characters.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
now I know who the people are and I like them. Of course I want to see them win.
Right.
And that can happen, too, even if you have what I would say arbitrarily picked a sports team to root for. Because if you start following the team, then you get to know the players, then you see them in interviews, you get to know all their names, and now you're like, oh, I am familiar with these guys. Now I want them to win even more because now I know them. You know, you feel like you know them. You know, and then it sort of becomes like this feedback loop, like this, you know, this cycle. You know, there's sort of a circle going on here where you start getting interested in a team, then you get to know the players, then you want them to win, which makes you like the team more.
Yeah.
And then, you know, and it's not like, I mean, maybe this happens, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not like everyone on the team gets fired all at once and they bring in a whole new team.
No.
That never happens. They sort of just slowly cycle through players.
Yeah.
And before you know it, you're following a whole new team in a way, but you've kind of gotten to know them slowly over time. Oh, this guy's an up-and-comer, and look at now he's on my team or our team. Or, hey, this guy came from another team, now he's working for us.
People retire, people get drafted, all sorts of things.
Right, and that is also like, that also feeds into that, like, well, no, these are my team because I like all these people. You know, it's interesting. But do you follow any individual sports at all, like a tennis or a golf or anything like that, or?
Not really, I don't think. I've never been into NASCAR or F1 or anything like that. I mean, I guess the Olympics. I don't really keep up with the Olympics, but that's an interesting example where it's sort of a little bit of both again. Where I remember watching Michael Phelps in 2008 win all 8 gold medals, like never been done before, and that was really cool because he's like rooting for this one individual, but it's also, well, he's representing our country, and that's where it goes back to the tribal thing again. That's the only reason I'm rooting for him is because I want to see him do well, but the reason is because he's representing my team.
Yeah, he's got the American flag on his shirt, so therefore he's my guy.
Yeah, he's representing a team by participating in his individual sport.
Well, at least in the Olympics, I think you kind of have to be from that country to participate for that country.
Yeah, there's a few
at least
rule
somewhat
quirks, maybe.
Yeah, there's like
for the most part. Yeah,
yeah. I remember I was watching the skateboarding Olympics. The only Olympics I watched this year was the skateboarding.
Yeah, there you go.
Because it was one, I sort of find it again an individual sport. Right. That's kind of what I find interesting.
Yeah.
And also I was kind of interested in the fact that first time it was in the Olympics was in the 2020 Olympics that happened in 2021.
Yeah.
Yeah. it was the first time skateboarding was. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And there was I remember looking up a couple of players, a couple of skaters, and I was like, oh, I forget what there was one girl who was like she was participating under under her country of Sweden because she had like dual citizenship or something.
Yeah.
And she was like, well, I want to give more Americans a chance, so I'll go under my other
that's
country.
Cool. Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. So I know it's not like perfectly, but for the most part, again, I'm contrasting the Olympics with, like American sports where the players can kind of be from anywhere, and yet they're representing your city,
right?
Which again, is kind of funny to think about. But yeah, so in that sense, I find individuals more interesting than a team.
Mm-hmm.
But again, going back to what I said is like there are aspects of that are interesting too, of like the strategy of how does the team work together. That can be really interesting.
Yeah.
Or even the other thing that I find really interesting is how have people been getting better at sports? Like just in general, I feel like the athletes we have today are like so much better than they were 50 years ago.
Oh yeah, for sure.
In everything,
right?
And that's interesting too. Like I remember having a long conversation with my dad where he was explaining to me why Tiger Woods was like the best and how he came along and he changed the way people played golf. I don't really remember the conversation, I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
But he was kind of a defining turning point maybe for the sport. Now everyone plays like Tiger or whatever it was, or people got better once he came along. Or like I remember a few years ago, I went down the rabbit hole of baseball pitchers and how they pitch and how they practice and what speeds they throw at and how they throw different balls. And like I think at one point I was looking up like the physics of how a curveball actually works. Mm-hmm. And like that is all stuff I find fascinating. Like the actual like athleticism and the skills required to do these ridiculous things with the human body.
Right.
Like I do find this I actually do find this interesting. I didn't realize I didn't know I found this interesting.
Yeah.
There's no way I could have known that, but I realized like, oh, that element of sports is different from, the being a fan of a team part of sports, which is different from being like part of a toxic culture of hyper masculinity sports, culture. Like, you know what I mean? Like these are all kind of different things. And I feel like I have a different relationship with each of them, the going into the stats on certain players or what this means and how they change this and how they play a different way. That's interesting to me. You know what I mean? Like that is an interesting part where I don't need to be a fan of a particular team in order to appreciate, oh, well, the way this player did it, they changed the game forever. Like, I don't need to be a fan of a team to appreciate that. And that's something I think I've learned in recent years, which is that part of sports can really interest me, even if I'm not a fan of even if I don't have any interest in the particular team.
Yeah. No, that is cool. I mean, it's fun watching humans excel at the highest possible points of athleticism and competition and everything. The one that comes to mind for me is I think it's called the high jump, maybe, that Olympic sport. Do you know the story about how that was changed?
No idea.
Or you know what the sport, at least the competition looks like, at least, where people run and they're holding a giant stick and then they have to get over a bar or something like that.
Yes.
Originally, I don't know how people did it, but they did it some backwards way where they would like go head first over the bar, and then some guy invented the way everyone does it now, where he did it and went over backwards, and he like broke every world record, won every gold medal that year, and like completely changed the way everyone does it his way now. So those sorts of things are interesting. And yeah, I know what you mean, just watching different athletes doing different things and just different chess matches within sports, like watching really good pitchers face really good hitters in baseball. It's like each pitch is a different move, and the hitter is learning something each time. Like, okay, he threw two fastballs on the outside of the plate. Is he going to do that again because I swung and missed, or is he going to try and fool me and come inside this time? Like those sorts of things I find interesting. Coaching as well, coaching decisions. I guess I've been lucky being a Patriots fan, getting to watch Bill Belichick, who's like widely considered the greatest football coach of all time, and just watching the way that he is able to fool players and and defenses and offenses and get wins consistently for 20 years is pretty incredible. And I think the best one of the best examples of that, at least recently, is it was such a big deal a few months ago. Or I guess it was only last month when the Patriots played the Buccaneers, because this was the first time Tom Brady was facing his old team. Is this a revenge game for Tom Brady? Do him and Bill Belichick have this weird beef and everything? And everyone was like, "Oh my God, Brady's gonna destroy them. He's mad. He wants to show that he's the best. He's better than Belichick and everything. He's gonna throw for like 3 or 4 touchdowns." And Belichick is so good and knows Brady so well that it was like the worst Brady has looked all year. He threw no touchdowns against the defense. And it's
really,
yeah, it's just interesting seeing the chess moves between those two people. Tom Brady's so motivated to beat this team, and he can't even throw a touchdown against them, something he does multiple times on any given Sunday most of the time. But Belichick is so smart and knows how to coach against him that he wasn't able to do it.
That's really cool.
Yeah, because there's a huge debate in sports about, was it more Brady or was it more Belichick that led to the Patriots' success? Obviously, the answer is both, and I think the argument is a little bit dumb. But it was really cool to see that, like, even the Patriots still lost that game, but Belichick sort of got the better of Brady in that one.
Wow, that is really interesting.
Yeah.
See, this is another example of like, I'm kind of interested in the guy. I'm interested in Tom Brady because he was with the Patriots for so long, then goes to another team. Again, I'm not really emotionally invested in the Patriots,
right?
But I understand the legacy of this team with Brady and Belichick, and it's interesting to see what's happened since he decided to go to the Bucs. And yeah, that is really interesting to me.
Yeah,
that people thought Brady's going to kick their ass because he's pissed off,
right?
And it turns out Belichick, of course, knows him so well that he can fight against him.
Yeah.
And you're right. That is like a game of chess. Yeah, that is fascinating.
Yeah. So all sorts of things like that, and just keeping records. Like any records are meant to be broken in sports, like keeping track of like batting average titles and like all-time passing leader in football. I think that's part of sports is really fun as well. Like, you're not really rooting for, I mean, there are team records, of course, but like rooting for individuals to break certain records is also a lot of fun, and seems like something you'd be more interested in.
Right. And I am. And yeah, I have an appreciation for the technical aspect of it, the planning, the strategic parts of it, the strategizing. I remember one time I was watching the Patriots win one of the Super Bowls. Amazing that we can even say that.
Yeah.
Which is kind of fun. But I was watching it with my dad, and I was sort of half paying attention or didn't understand what the big deal was. And having someone with very, very intense sports knowledge being able to explain the play they're doing and how difficult it is, and the fact that they just pulled this off to win the game, and it was like, oh, okay, I do have an appreciation. I can appreciate this. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, my relationship with sports has been for so long like either indifference or annoyance, and it's only been, I feel like, in the last handful of years where I've started to see that there's more to it than just people being crazy fans of their team.
Right. Was it a particular sports event in particular that moved the needle at all?
I don't think so. I think it was several things over a period of time of like just being around conversations where people talk about it, or every once in a while there would be some sports story of some team that kind of broke through my bubble.
Right.
I don't follow any of these people. I don't keep up with this. But if it breaks through my bubble, it must be pretty big. And then I could always go to, a lot of people in my family are into sports, especially my dad. And so I usually go to one of them and be like, okay, but explain to me why this is a big deal. What's going on here? And I think it's just been numerous conversations like that over the course of a few years where I've realized like, oh, okay, there are parts of this I do like.
Yeah. That's cool.
I just still can't get behind any one particular team too invested. I have a hard time doing it.
Right.
It's just I just see it as well. Why would I root for that team instead of the other one?
Right.
But again,
maybe just stick to golf.
Yeah. Right. But again, like that being said, it does feel, it is really fun, because I think I've also been around like Super Bowl parties when someone's team wins the Super Bowl, and that is a really fun feeling.
Yeah, for sure.
It is really fun to feel like, oh, we're part of a club here.
Right.
Me and all these people are all rooting for the same thing, and they just won, and isn't this a great feeling? Like that, there is something there. That is something.
Yeah.
And I don't want to completely discount that, because I have kind of felt that in a weird way, and that, I think that feeling is probably very strong.
Yeah.
And it's probably what keeps people coming back.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, that's why clips always go viral of whenever a team dramatically loses or wins. There's viral videos of people throwing remotes into their TV, just things like that, because it just causes some sort of reaction in people. And I think the best example of that is when the Cubs won the World Series. It was seriously 108 years since they had won one. So pretty much no living person had seen a Cubs World Series and certainly couldn't remember one. And I remember watching a video when they won of an 86-year-old man. He's like in his mid-80s, maybe his 90s or something, like sitting on the couch and celebrating, watching the Cubs win the World Series. And it's like, come on, how could that not make you feel some sort of joy? This man who's lived his entire life rooting for this team that has never won, finally at the end of his life, gets the job done.
Right. Whereas the kind of clips that I'll send to you and our friends in our group chats is like, I sent a baseball one a few weeks ago that was some amazing pitch or something. Do you remember what it was? Now I don't remember.
I don't think so.
No, it was a month or two ago. There was some amazing pitch or catch, or no, someone stole home plate.
Oh yeah.
There was. Do you remember who this was?
Yeah, it was Randy Arozarena against the Rays, or against the Red Sox, playing for the Rays.
Right. Oh, that's right. And again, I'm a little bit predisposed to want to root for the Red Sox. But then I'm looking at this and I'm like, well, damn, you can't beat that. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it happened against my team, so I was annoyed, but it's like, it's hard not to just tip your cap to that,
Right. And I appreciate that you can say that as a Red Sox fan, because I think there are some people wwho be like, no, I'm not giving the guy the credit. No, I don't.
Exactly.
No,
Fuck
I don't
him.
care. Right. Yeah. Right. What an asshole for doing that. Right. Or like the other day, I stumbled across the in Formula One, the world's fastest pit stop was like under 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't even follow Formula One, but this is really cool.
I know.
It's
so
like
impressive.
there's just stuff. It's really amazing that humans come up with these arbitrary games of where to put balls. Get them in a hoop, get them in between these two poles, hit it with a round piece of wood. We come up with these games that are really kind of silly. Who came up with this? And then they just push their bodies to the absolute limits of what they could possibly humanly do.
Right.
And it's amazing. Sometimes it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I wonder if watching Survivor has changed your opinion on sports at all, because it is sort of the competition aspect of it, at least, is everything you just described, of pushing your body to the absolute limit that it can take to achieve great heights.
Yeah, there might be something in that. That is true. There might be something there.
Yeah.
That, because that's also an interesting aspect of sports. Is like, look at the lengths that people will go to. Look at how much they'll train. Look at what they'll do in order to just win this game. Like the guy playing with the bleeding ankle.
Right.
It's like he's still playing. He pitched 7 innings.
Yeah.
After just having had surgery on his ankle and it's bleeding through his shoe and he can't even feel his foot anymore, or whatever he said.
Yeah.
And it's kind of similar to Survivor, where it's like, no, these people are stranded on an island. They barely have any food, and yet they're still going to give it their all. They're going to put everything they have into moving this rock. So that their team wins immunity to go to the next round. It's so funny. No, it's really that is a very interesting aspect of it too. Is people coming up with these games that maybe are very silly when they're first invented, but now we take them very seriously.
Right.
I mean, I remember my dad telling me he once got hooked up to that. There's that machine where you swing your golf club and it analyzes your swing in like slow motion. The machine costs like $20,000 or something. And he's like, oh yeah, but all the pros have this at their house, and they just sit in front and swing in front of this thing,
Wow.
in front of this machine for 8 hours a day, and this is how they practice. This is how they get
insane.
that. And it's like, and you know, and that's where also my interest in technology merges in this, which is like we're using computers to analyze the swing of the player and how that. What can we do better here? And like that, that's all interesting too.
Mm-hmm.
So no, there's a lot. Sports is a big. It's a big topic.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like the word drug, where it's like that covers a lot of different things. Like that's anything from like an Advil to heroin.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
sports can be anything from like golf, where you're just putting,
Mm-hmm.
all the way to like American football, where you have guys beating each other, and like concussions, or rugby. I mean, just
Right.
people just going crazy. Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
sports is
runs the gamut.
it's a big topic. There's a lot to be said about it, but also means there's different aspects of it.
Yeah.
And I think some of those are really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. What do you have an opinion or a question or any thoughts really on fantasy sports in particular? Because this is something that I've seen like confuses other sports fans. Or like people that aren't interested in sports. I mean,
Oh yeah, I don't understand that at all.
really?
I'll be honest. I really don't get. Here's what I get about fantasy sports, or at least fantasy football. 'Cause that seems to be the only one people do.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like everybody gets to make up. Here's what I think it is. Everybody gets to make up their own team,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have a list of every player in the NFL, and then you and your friends draft who you want on your team.
Right.
And then as the real players play through on their team, if you picked, Tom Brady to be on your fictional fantasy football sports team,
Mm-hmm.
and Tom Brady scored a touchdown in one of his games, that means your team scored a touchdown because Tom Brady scored a touchdown for your team.
Right.
Do I have this right? I'm getting this right?
Yeah, the broad strokes at least, You've got the ideas, right?
Right. Okay. So why do people do fantasy football? Why do people do fantasy? Is it just a game on top of a game? Is it just another way of feeling like you're involved? Is it just getting involved?
Yeah, it's a way to be interested in the sport when it's not your team, like the Patriots. Like I root for the Patriots, but fantasy sports is a way for me to care about the other games going on. Like, okay, I only have one player on the Patriots, so it leaves me interested in these other players I have on these 10 other teams. Like, it's a reason to watch the sport when your team isn't on, if that's something that you're interested in. But I don't know, there's a gambling aspect of it a little bit where you can bet money on it and bet on yourself to do well.
Right,
Honestly,
right, of course.
80% of fantasy sports is luck. But I think there's just something really fun about it to me when you just feel really confident that, okay, this player is going to do amazing this season. He's going to be the best player. Everyone else thinks he's going to be the 5th best player, but I'm going to get him before everyone else in that way. And like, at the end of the season, when it works out for me, I'll celebrate and rub it in everybody's face that I was right about it. So there's just something fun about learning about strategy before season and figuring out what decisions you want to make and then seeing if it works out for yourself. So it's just a fun way to stay involved and pretend like you know more about sports than other people.
Yeah, I could see that, because if your fantasy team has people from all over all the different teams,
Mm-hmm.
it means you sort of have to pay attention to every team.
Right.
Or at least the ones where you have people on it, right?
Yeah.
And even if you don't have any players from that,
Your
someone
opponent does.
Exactly. Someone else in your fantasy league has a player from that team, and so you want to pay attention to what's going on with your opponents as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that is an interesting aspect to it. I guess. You mentioned something I did want to ask you a second ago. We mentioned Tom Brady leaving the Patriots.
Yeah.
Do you still root for Tom Brady? Like, what's your relationship to Tom Brady now? You know what I mean? Like, this is what I want to know, because I look at it as, well, I'm still happy if the Patriots win because my friends like the Patriots.
Yeah.
But also, Tom Brady's a really good player. I'm curious to see how he does on a different team.
Right.
Like, to me, it's almost like I have a passing interest in how how's everybody going to do. But you have a little bit of emotional invested in this, and I'm curious what is now your relationship with that.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I was hoping that he would just retire instead of going to another team. I thought it would have been cool to have him end his career as a Patriot, but it wasn't meant to be. And I have no hate towards him at all. I root for him every game unless he's playing the Patriots. And I did really want to beat him when he played us because it would have been so much fun to beat him. But yeah,
and that's what happened.
No, he won. He won the
okay.
game, but Belichick played really well against him.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Better
Gotcha.
than people thought.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I was rooting for him hard in the Super Bowl just because he's one of those like once in a lifetime sort of players that it's like he's such an icon. He did more for one team than anyone has ever done in NFL history, and you get to know him so well as a person just through interviews and his character on and off the field that it's like when the connection is that strong to someone, I can't just look the other way and be like, oh, he's just any other player that left our team. Like, no, this is different. This is a little bit more special.
Right. Well, yeah, it's interesting. I'm now thinking about individual versus team sports again, and it's like, well, if you're only following an individual, well, what happens when that guy retires? You know.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have a team that you're just with this team for life, the team's not going to go. Well, they might. It's unlikely. Let's put it this way: it's unlikely the whole team will go away.
Yeah.
I mean, there are things where teams move to a different city and get a new name or whatever.
Right.
Or sometimes they just move to a new city and they don't get a new name.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but for the most part, like it leaves the team can be a constant for your entire life.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas a single player cannot.
Mm-hmm.
And that is an interest. I never really thought about that till just now, just us talking about it.
Yeah, no, and I think it's sort of the highs and lows of being a fan of a team forever, whereas there's going to be years, maybe decades, where your team is just terrible and
Right.
you do nothing, and then finally when something good happens and you win the Super Bowl, whatever it is, like it's going to feel that much better because it took so long to get there.
Right.
But I've been pretty lucky myself when it comes to that.
Well, I've been lucky too because I never cared about any of this. So.
Right. You're always winning.
Right. Yeah. Really. I'm really I always come out on top.
Yeah. Just root for whoever's winning the game.
Well, that was always my argument, which was people ask me, "Who's your favorite team?" I go, "Well, who's winning?" That's my favorite team. I'm
Right.
rooting for the best. Why would I not be a fan of the best of the team? Isn't that logical?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a fun way to talk to a sports fan.
They get so angry.
Oh, I bet. Oh man.
Do we have more to say?
I don't think I have much more to say.
I feel like I got a lot out.
Yeah.
I have more issues with sports than you do.
Yeah.
So I had to talk more.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe not more, but
Yeah. More thoughts, I guess.
yeah.
More differing opinions.
Right.
Yeah. No, that was cool though. That was fun.
But you see where I'm coming from.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I guess we had talked about sports
Enough.
before. No,
Right.
I think before. I guess your opinion has changed a little bit when you were more like, I don't understand this at all.
Wait, really? So I have changed. So even in the time that
Yeah.
you've known me,
Oh, yeah, for
I've
sure.
gotten less annoying.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I remember, we had a conversation about it where you were, like, laughing at me that I cared about a team at all. I wasn't upset about it, obviously, but I was like, wow, he really doesn't get it.
No, I get it's fun to have something to rally around.
Yeah.
I do get that. I just felt like I could never pick one for myself.
Right.
That's all.
Yeah, that's fair. Just root for the individuals.
Well, I'm glad we've come to an understanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
We got to turn the World Series on now.
That's on right now.
Yep.
All right, let's put it on.